Hi, everyone. I'm David Williams, president of strategy consulting firm Health Business Group and host of the HealthBiz podcast, a weekly show where I interview top healthcare leaders about their lives and careers. My guest today is Ashish Shah. He's co-founder and CEO of Dina, a health engagement company making it easier for people to stay healthy at home by organizing and simplifying access to an ecosystem of home and community-based providers. If you enjoy this episode, please press that like button and subscribe. Ashish, welcome to the HealthBiz podcast.
Thanks, David. Appreciate you having me on the show.
Listen, Dina has a worthy goal, so I look forward to getting into that discussion pretty soon. Before doing that, I want to hear a little bit about how you got there, starting way back at the beginning, maybe with your background, your upbringing. What was your childhood like? Any influences from childhood that have stuck with you throughout your career?
Yeah, well, it's this is probably gonna be a little bit of a trip down memory lane. I don't normally think through a lot of these things, but I was born and raised in Chicago. My family came over to the U.S. In 1970, and so my dad visited Chicago, and must have been the summer because he really fell in love with the city. It's one of the best in the world at that time. But then it quickly became home, and that was I was the first of my family born and raised in the U.S. and Chicago in particular. So a lot of my early influences, I would have to say, have to do with my parents. I have an older brother and a younger sister. Both of them had a pretty profound impact on me and ultimately my journey, but just at a really high level, a little bit about my background.
Sounds good. Sometimes when I'm overseas and you talk to people and you mention Chicago, and they have this very strong view of it from the gangster movies, which I have to tell them that was a while ago, and we don't ride around in cars like that anymore either, or wear that type of hat. But maybe your dad didn't see that, or maybe he saw something else that told him to head over there. Certainly a great spot.
Yeah.
Do you have like a middle child syndrome? I'm a first child, so.
Yeah, I'm sure I do, but I own it. I embrace it. It's the best of both worlds for me. I have an older brother and a younger sister, and so I'm very close to both of them. There's a little bit of a bigger age gap between the two of them, and I think they're probably closer now that we're all adults. But I actually think it's quite great to be in the middle. I get a chance to kind of bring people together in the family.
Very nice. So what did you do in terms of your education after high school?
Yeah, I went to Iowa State University, and so I studied computer engineering. Really creating just great experiences and product is something that I've always been passionate about. I thought my whole life I was going to be an architect, and so I went into my freshman year really thinking that I was going to really design incredible structures and experiences for people. But it was around that time where I started to tinker more and more with computers and technology. And Iowa State had at that time one of a handful of fully immersive virtual reality labs in the world, fully suspended, could project from all different directions. And that was probably the moment that I started to fall in love with the idea of being able to create through a new medium in the virtual world and with tech. And at that point, .com, craze was starting. And so I was fully drafted into that experience.
Very nice. I saw you were at Diamond Management and Technology Consultants for a while. What was that like?
It was an incredible experience. I joined the firm in early 2001. 2001 was a very, as you can imagine, a very interesting year. There was a lot of things from the dot-com bubble bursting all the way through to September 11th, then the subsequent recession that followed it. But my experience at Diamond was just world class. The people were top notch. The clients that we were serving were top tier. They invited us into their most strategic sort of problems, and really trusted us to help them navigate some pretty complex and uncertain times. But the people, I keep coming back to, everyone from that era that I was exposed to either as a client or a team member, I just learned such an incredible amount in those early years. And I continue to stay connected to many of those people, 20 plus years later. Just a wonderful way to launch a career.
And how about Medicity?
Yeah, my time at Medicity, prior to Diamond, I had a number of opportunities to work at places like Microsoft, Boeing, a startup in the e-commerce space. And I guess that's where I really caught the bug in terms of commercial product development. And so
Mm-hmm.
my time with Diamond was great. It really exposed me to, I would say, more of the business of tech more than anything. But towards the end of my run, I started to sort of have the itch to get back into product, if you will. And so my last client at Diamond was LabCorp, one of the largest national reference labs in the country, quickly scaling globally. And they asked me to kick the tires on a small up and coming company that they were partnering with out of Salt Lake City, Utah. That was Medicity. And, you know, when I first went out there to meet with the leadership team, I fell in love with the team of about 20 or so that were really working at that time on a newer emerging problem of health information sharing between EMRs. There weren't a lot of people doing that. EMR adoption was about 5% in the country at that time. And so I got a chance to get a seat on that ride, and it was an incredible journey. Much like my experience at Diamond, just worked with tremendously awesome people on a really important product and mission, and we had quite a bit of success together on
Nice.
that run.
Now, I see there's a couple of things that I think you've done concurrently with Dina and advisory rules, and I don't know if you want to share anything about those, the OpenMarkets, and I see the Quinlan School of Business at Loyola University. Are those things
Yeah,
that you're actively involved in?
yeah. Thanks for asking about those. So I'm an active advisor at OpenMarkets Health. Really neat company that is building a connected marketplace, almost an Amazon-like experience that connects suppliers of healthcare equipment to providers of healthcare equipment to really streamline the access to those goods and services. And actually, during COVID in particular, when there was such a shortage of ventilators, this became a very important company, and they were helping dynamically source equipment to help service people in really overrun hospitals at that time. So, really proud of my connection to that company. They're doing really interesting work, and hope you get a chance to interact with that team because they're quite good. And then my work with the Baumhart Center, in particular, part of Loyola's Quinlan School of Business, is another just wonderful program. They've launched a social entrepreneurship program within their College of Business, and this is, we spend a lot of time in the market talking about DEI, but even before the big trend, if you will, they were really investing in that sort of thought leadership and really trying to cultivate purpose-driven leaders. And for me, and what really drives me, it was a really nice fit for me to spend some time with the university. And so, really nice to work with that program and really to be inspired on a daily basis by the leaders that they're drafting into the program that are really going to change the world from this point forward.
Well, great. So let's talk about Dina, and I would be interested, first of all, to understand, what was the unmet need? By this time, you'd been around for a while, seen a lot of things, knew what you were interested in. I saw some stuff in the market, but why a need for new company?
Yeah, um, I guess I'll go back to the Medici story a little bit. At the time that I joined that company, it was still young, but they had a good start. The people up until that point had built a really nice base of the business, and what we did there by the end was we had north of 12 to 1,300 hospitals connected to every major reference laboratory and primary care practice sharing data electronically through our platform. In 2011, January 2011, that company was acquired by Aetna. And so I stayed for a few years, part of that journey. But 6 months after that, my dad suddenly passed away. It was something that our family was not prepared for in any way, shape, or form. And as we spent time with the people that were caring for him when he passed, there were in-home caregivers. He was in and out of senior centers. They saw a decline coming, and yet that information wasn't really being shared. David, I didn't know a whole lot about the home care space.
Yeah.
I'd worked with many health plans and provider systems, but this was not an area that I was an expert in by any means, nor were any of my colleagues. And, I guess what gnawed at me was the experience that there was adult family caregivers, connected, smart, knowledgeable, that felt they could really influence the care that they were receiving. There were insights from these people who were around my dad in particular, and yet that information wasn't being shared in a meaningful way. I would say that was the starting point of the Dina story, and that was quite early in my Aetna journey. After 3 years inside the company, I continued to see a lot of value-based care innovation, whether it was managed Medicaid or Medicare Advantage, pioneer ACOs that were being formed. And none of them were really tapping into the potential of this personal insight that I had, where if you want to really reach and influence the care that someone receives, you need to get to where they are. And that's usually in their homes and in their communities. And so after a few years, I decided to ultimately step out and really focus on building a business that would help health plans and providers really connect to that home and community-based care to really solve a number of problems.
So, what was it like getting it started? Obviously, came from a personal inspiration in a way. It was something you, I guess, became expert on before getting going. But what were the early days like?
The early days, were exciting, really exciting, and we continue to be excited, but it's different. And so, in the first moments, it truly is a napkin, an idea. Maybe one other person. I do have a co-founder, David Cole, who I worked with for a very long time at Medici. He was a co-founder there. And so to be able to have a partner right out of the gate that we could collaborate around an idea, it was exciting. I mean, it was very, very exciting. We were iterating on the idea, the research, sharing what we were learning in the market. I wouldn't even say daily. It was multiple times a day that we were iterating on the concept. And so it was quite exciting in the beginning. When you fully commit to it is when I think things started to change for me a little bit. The seriousness of not just being excited about the idea and the potential of what you could do, but there are moments where you come to grips with, all right, I'm working without a salary. I'm working without a client. We don't have anything built yet. Those
Yeah.
are moments that really sort of test your commitment and your passion for what you're really pursuing.
So, say a little bit about what you actually are offering and maybe how that's evolved, and who are the customers, who are the users that are involved here?
Yeah, so we're typically working with care navigators or care coordinators. We started the business, David, working with health systems, and typically around that transition from hospital back to home. It's usually acute, episodic. Somebody has a knee replacement or maybe perhaps CHF and had admission in the hospital. That journey back home is complicated. There are in-home service providers. There's durable medical equipment that may need to be delivered. So building a digital network of all of your partners outside of the hospital was a key problem that we focused on solving in the early days. Where the business has evolved is, in addition to that, we're now increasingly working with health plans directly. So government programs, think Medicare Advantage or managed Medicaid. And what we're seeing is a huge explosion in the number of supplemental benefits or in-home services that are being offered. And many of these health plan coordinators and navigators do not necessarily have any sort of mechanism to efficiently identify who can meet a member's needs. So who's the best fit provider, understanding whether they're available or not. In a market like this post-COVID, staffing challenges continue to really be a big pain point. And then once you can actually arrange for that particular care for that person, how is it going? And that's a question that ultimately is not really being answered very well today in a real-time manner.
Now, somewhere along the way, the company changed its name, and the name is Dina. So my question is, why the name change, and who's Dina?
Yeah, who is Dina? Dina, in the early days, we had two products. One that was the name of our network, NTouch, our digital network, and the second was the digital nursing assistant embedded inside of that network and coordination experience, Dina. And over time, I would see people. They would ask me about the company. They would always goof up the name of our company at that time.
Yeah.
Prepared health. There are so many something healths out there, and they would call
Yeah.
it preferred or whatnot. But they would always ask me about Dina. They didn't know what
Yeah.
Dina did. They didn't know what the
Yeah.
product really was, but it was really memorable. And so right before COVID, we decided to rebrand the business before we started to go into more geographies. And we had a 4-letter word that we owned that was friendly, that was tied to our product story that customers found memorable. And so we decided to really lean into it. And I just remember the moment we were so anxious the night before we launched and cut
Yeah.
over. Would people like it? Would they understand it? And it was instant, David. I mean, we were nobody could remember the past. It was Dina from that moment
Yeah,
forward.
nice. It's good when it works out like that. So,
Yeah.
it talk about the supplemental benefits. You said there's all these that are being offered. They're real hard to kind of to arrange and see if they're working. I mean, how do you even know what's the right kind of a supplemental benefit design, even at that level? Do those make sense in terms of meeting the needs of the patient? Just say a little bit more about that world.
Yeah. Well, so there's a huge focus moving forward on addressing the social determinants of health and addressing some of the broader health equity challenges that we have in the market. And so I'll start by saying that at a policy level, CMS has really recognized the importance of, in some cases, food, transport, in-home services, home modification services, things that are non-traditional, non-medical benefits that can really affect um, someone's overall healthcare experience, outcomes, but also have a pretty profound impact on the total cost of care for an individual as well. So what Medicare has done is through their value-based insurance design program, VBID, allowed Medicare Advantage plans to submit bids or proposals to be able to experiment with these supplemental benefits, seek approval that would then form a partnership with Medicare where they could share data around the effectiveness of that particular benefit before it gets offered more broadly. And I think that's really smart. I mean, I think there's been some really great successes to date with people using these benefits in a new and creative manner. If you look at in-home services in particular, in 2020, there's a couple hundred plans that offered that as a supplemental benefit. In 2023, there's north of 1,100. And so that's a 5x increase. Train has left the station. I think health plans have found that offering these supplemental benefits are not only good for members, but in a race to enroll as many Medicare beneficiaries into these MA plans, it's a true differentiator. We're now north of 50% of Medicare beneficiaries enrolled in a Medicare Advantage plan. So the benefits they're great, but they're also something that the consumer market wants, and they're voting with their pocketbooks. Just as it relates to the benefits in particular.
Now, these Medicare Advantage plans are a form of value-based care. That's how they're set up. Is technology a helper to actually realize the promise of value-based care? And if so, how does that work?
Certainly it is, but it is you need great technology to support it. So much of the value-based care innovations are around connected care, coordinated care, because these are the things that our healthcare system are not really well designed for. When you're in front of a physician or one of their care team members, you could have a wonderful experience, but sometimes the incentives aren't really aligned to continue that experience. And for multiple team members, 5 to 10 or 12 different team members across the continuum to work together. And I think that is something that technology is doing a wonderful job solving in many other industries. So, of course, I think there's massive potential for that just being a better foundation in healthcare. So I think technology has a big role, but I think there's also new types of roles that are emerging: care navigators, coordinators. So it's also a talent conversation as well. Social workers are people who are actually trained to assess holistically what an individual and their family needs in their home and in their community. And so sort of raising their profile and getting them more prominently positioned. I think we're seeing many organizations focus in on that as well. And then I think there's creativity in the business mechanics of healthcare too. The types of organizations that you need to bring into your health plan product. Who do you contract with? How do you get them paid? So technology is certainly very important, but so is the design of the type of talent and services that you bring into the products that are offered in the market.
You talked before about an impact of the pandemic being a challenge on the staffing side. Have there been other significant game-changing impacts from the pandemic on the space that you're operating in?
I would say the biggest one, David, is before COVID in particular, people would nod their heads when we would describe what we're after to do, and they would call it noble, and they would understand it. And perhaps it was just limited to seniors. I think post-pandemic, I think there's a really broad acceptance and understanding that care is going to be delivered in three ways: in high-quality physical settings, virtually online via telehealth, and it's going to be brought to you in your home. We don't have to convince people of that anymore. This is how healthcare will work. And of course, there's some mixed modality across each one of those different three delivery mechanisms. So for us, things have really become clear for the market of who we are, why we exist, and what our role is, which is really to create the platform that powers access to home-based care.
We talked about technology before the pandemic. Now the thing that's on everybody's lips is artificial intelligence. And I'm wondering, does that affect what you do now, and how do you see it rolling out over whatever time frame you want to pick?
Yeah, it's here to stay. There's no way to put that genie back in the bottle. I think if I look back to our founding story, and even the namesake Dina, it was a digital nursing assistant embedded in the platform. And the reason why we did that is because there's such a huge shortage of healthcare workers, whether it's physicians or support staff or access to the talent. And so I think AI is going to have a profound impact on everything. I think where it's going to have a great deal of value right out of the gate is on many administrative pain points, whether it's prior authorizations, claim adjudication, matching a member or a patient to the right level of services and care to really eliminate friction points. There's a lot of administrative burden that's placed on everyone across the entire care continuum, including patients and families. I think that's a wonderful place to start to really create a better experience, but also attack some of the wasted spend that we have across the industry. It will eventually, of course, bleed into the patient experience and other aspects of what we do down to the scientific level. But I guess I'm zeroed in on the administrative side because there's not a lot of fans of the experience there.
No, not many. There may be a couple out there. I haven't met them. If so, it's impressive how. I mean, the administrivia is incredible, but it's also amazing how much is actually people manage to get done. So it's quite a burden. Look ahead, maybe 10 years, and say, put AI out of the picture for a minute, and just say, like, what's your vision in terms of going back, maybe all the way to your founding story and the impetus for the company? How is life going to be different for somebody, let's say, that's hitting Medicare Advantage in 10 years compared to what it was like for somebody, say, 5 years ago?
I think let's start on the shorter term horizon for a moment. I think in the next few years, Medicare Advantage beneficiaries are going to choose plans based on the types of services they offer. I think they will increasingly become more standard versus supplemental, where the plans compete on that. Regulation is already coming to hold health plans accountable on what is the access and utilization of these. So you can't just offer them to attract membership in, but are you actually using home modification services and in-home services and transport and healthy meals as examples? So I think you're going to see a shift in the market from not just designing benefits but actually being more accountable and making sure that members can use them, and then doing the math around the impact around retention, total cost of care, outcomes. That's near term. You'll see that in the next 3 to 5 years, certainly. Yeah. I think in 10 years' time, you're going to see health plan products, health systems really engage around kind of what I outlined in terms of 3 delivery mechanisms. Individuals and families are going to be able to choose healthcare access and delivery on their terms. And so it won't just be virtual only. It just won't be in-person only or in-home only. You're going to be able to design your experience that meets your needs in a way that is frictionless and without a lot of waste in that. So I think we're going to become much, much more consumer-centric. I think we're going to become much more efficient. And I think it's ultimately going to lead to a much better product experience. And we need to do this.
Yeah.
We have 10 to 11,000 people turning 65 years old a day. We need to do it for our seniors regardless, because that's a very fast growing space. But as I mentioned, COVID sort of expanded the scope to beyond seniors. I think those who are vulnerable and those who are even healthy, they prefer healthcare on their terms as well. So I think there's a very large transformation that we're in the middle of right now.
Ashish, the last question for you is whether you've had any time for reading, if you have any books that you would recommend, or anything that you recommend that we avoid even.
I appreciate you asking about books that you would avoid. None that I can sort of recommend to avoid right now. 2 that I've read recently, they're probably, I spend a lot of time reading business books, so they're not always the most exciting, I think.
Yeah.
But 2 that I read over 10 years ago that I find quite helpful to revisit. One is called The Wide Lens by Ron Adner. He's a professor at Tuck School of Business in Dartmouth. And Wide Lens really talks about not just minimally viable products, but really minimally viable ecosystems. And I think in healthcare in particular, it's a really important book to think about. If you're going to drive positive change, you really have to think about the entire ecosystem, the incentives, and how do you actually bring the innovation to market. So it's good to revisit that recently, especially in light of the work that we're doing. And the second just has a really tough title, but I think is good: The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team.
Okay.
And I think it's just a really good book for anyone who's committed to building really healthy relationships. Even if I think about my relationships with my family, let alone my team here at Dina, every relationship has a journey where things are wonderful, and there are times where perhaps you can be misaligned, and you could start to see things like a lack of trust or artificial harmony, things that may get in the way of high performance. And so I thought it's a really well written book, leadership fable style. You can consume it pretty quickly. But what I found is there's some really great conversations that come out of it that really allow you to talk to your partners in life and in business in a way that allow you to think about objectively, how do you become your best? And so those are 2 that come to mind.
Well, Ashish Shah, co-founder and CEO of Dina, thank you very much for joining me today on the HealthBiz podcast.
David, I really appreciate you having me on the show. Thank you.
You've been listening to the HealthBiz podcast with me, David Williams, president of Health Business Group. I conduct in-depth interviews with leaders in healthcare, business, and policy. If you like what you hear, go ahead and subscribe on your favorite service. While you're at it, go ahead and subscribe on your second and third favorite services as well. There's more good stuff to come, and you won't want to miss an episode. If your organization is seeking strategy consulting services in healthcare, check out our website, healthbusinessgroup.com.